was, it was still the Hindu legal system operating alongside Islam. So transitions everywhere. Pirish also tells us about Kalimantan. He says most of the islands, he thinks there was more. Kalimantan wasn't circumnavigated until the 17th century. People thought it was several islands. The same is true of Halmahera and other places. But he says the chief island, by which he means Brunei, was Muslim. We already know that from the gravestones. East of Java, Madura was still not yet Muslim. Bali, Lombok, Sumbawa, Flores, Timor, all pre-Muslim at this stage. But in the Spice Islands out here, so Banda, Ceylon, Ambon, these areas, which where spices came from, nutmeg, clove, and mace, there was great trade routes. There he describes a process by which kings are becoming Muslims and their followers converting with them, but still lots of people in the countryside who were not Muslims. So we are fortunate to have Pirish observing a very early stage of Islamization. Tidore, for example, has a king called Raja al-Mansur, and we begin to see. In Makassar, the Bugis were still pre-Muslim. In fact, we know that area wasn't converted to Islam until the early 17th century. So now we begin to see a west to east spread of Islam, following the trade routes. By the early 16th century, the trade system was basically dominated by Muslims, and so were the areas being touched by them. Malacca, as a great center of trade in the area, was also a great center for Islam. But as I said, that doesn't answer the question of why people convert. We begin to see the timing very crudely because the evidence is very patchy. But why were people converted? Particularly since, as I said, there had been traders in the area for a long time without evident conversion. Now, we can turn to some of the traditional stories, which are legendary, but may give us some sense of what the early stage was like and what may have motivated some of the early conversions. We've got particularly texts in Malay and Javanese. They're all later texts, by the way. Most of them are from 18th, 19th century and from copies, but no doubt have contents which go back to earlier periods. Hikayat Raja Rajapasai, for example, tells the story of the conversion of Malik Asali. It tells the story of the conversion of the man whose gravestone was found. According to this story, the caliph, the great Islamic leader of the world, sends a ship to fulfill a prophecy of the prophet himself that a great Islamic city would be founded in Samudra. On the way, they pick up a Muslim hermit in India, and off they go. Now, meanwhile, while they're on their ship, the local king called Merle C has a dream in which the prophet appears to him, gives him the title Sultan Malik al-Saleh, which is the title found in the grave, passes knowledge of Islam to him magically by spitting into his mouth. And this is actually a theme which comes up in several legends of the magical transfer of knowledge by spitting into the mouth of the city. Malik al-Saleh wakes up, he finds he can recite the confession of faith, he can read the Quran, even though he's never learned Arabic, never learned script, he can magically read this. He's also been circumcised magically. I always think, well, that's the easiest way to do it, no problem. And he declares he's a Muslim. Then the ship arrives, he says, this is as it was in my dream. Of course, he's recognized as the local Muslim lord, and all the kingdom converts. There's another story in the text about the conversion story of Sultan Ahmad. This man is said to have been, he was already a sultan, he'd been reigning for some time, and one day a man from Kalinga, who was in India, came with a ship. It was a great supernatural Hindu magician. So the Hindu magician comes to Sultan Ahmad and says, I am a yogi and I can do magic. He has a walking stick. And he puts the walking stick in the jar and begins to contort magically like a snake and twists itself into loops. He thrusts the stick into a wooden board and moves and twists. But the Sultan just sits there. Suddenly the Hindu yogi is totally overcome by the sanctity, the mere sanctity of the Sultan's presence. So he says, my lord, I must embrace Islam. So, two stories in this text which are all about the magical power of Islam to convert people. Sajjad Malai was another text, similar sorts of stories. In this case, a chap called Rajatana again finds himself magically circumcised, repeats the confession of faith. All the kingdom said, look, he's praying. And people say, what are these strange noises and strange movements? What do they mean? And then the ship arrives, which is dreamed, and so that was the Sayyid Abdul Aziz gets out, gets on the beach, prays, everyone says, that's the way it was in the dream, and again, everybody converts. Everybody embraces Islam. It is magical dreams. Now, Baba Tamat Chawi is Javanese. It's actually it's got a generic name for a certain kind of Javanese text. There are lots of manuscripts. This talks about the conversion of Javanese. But one difference I want to draw to your attention is that in the Malay texts, the Malay conversion in Islam is all about these magical events. And we're going to see some magic in Java too. But it's about dramatic transitions. Whereas in the